The original Bloodline has reunited. The reunion is official, and that took place on this week's edition of WWE SmackDown, and there was some other notable stuff on the show. Of course, you had Randy Orton doing a stretcher job after Kevin Owens hit the Piledriver on him. You had a new championship announced on the show, and we'll get into everything. Before we do, I keep telling you guys, be sure to follow me on Twitter at WrestleBlake, doing some fun stuff over there, so be sure to click on that link in the description and pin comment below. Follow me there at WrestleBlake on Twitter. Let's get into it, because this was a big episode, and we know, again, everything we've been talking about over the past little while was going to lead to that big moment where you had Roman Reigns, Jey Uso, Jimmy Uso, and Sami Zayn all standing in the ring together, throwing up the ones. We didn't know when it was going to happen. We didn't know how long it was going to take, but they finally got there on this week's Raw, or this week's edition of SmackDown. And now I think you see how it plays out over the next several weeks. I don't think it's as simple as these guys are all back on the same page and nothing could possibly tear them apart before they get to War Games at Survivor Series. I think that's where the intrigue comes in now, because you do still have 3 weeks before you get there. And I think there is still some of that history between these four that you're going to have to kind of bring out to where, you know, the can they coexist question is still going to be in everyone's minds once we get to Vancouver. I don't think it's going to be as simple as, well, they're all back the same way they were before, right? Because you could see that with some of the interactions on this particular show. You know, you had Sami being the one that comes out kind of at Jay's request here. Reigns initially is not having it. He does not want to have this conversation with Sami Zayn for all the reasons why it would make sense that Reigns wouldn't want to have these conversations, because as you guys know, we've talked about it before. You know, such a sort of visceral moment when you had Zayn kind of break away from the Bloodline at the Royal Rumble, you know, and now, you know, he hits Roman Reigns with the chair. It leads to the match between the two. As Sami said himself, they've never, you know, kind of been in the same ring together for a while now, in terms of, like, since this whole split has happened, you haven't had these two have to come back together and find a way to work it out, right? And so I think what you still have here is that Zayn, you know, does the right thing, right? Sami Zayn is the babyface. He does the right thing, and he's doing this, as he said, for Jey Uso more than anything. And yet you still have Roman Reigns, who is kind of playing the Roman Reigns, right, that we're used to seeing. This is not just some new Roman Reigns. Just because the fans are cheering him now, you don't have a completely new, you know, tribal chief. And I think that's the way it should be. You shouldn't have this guy just come out and pander to the fans and all this other stuff. He's still someone who we've talked about before that is wrestling with this decision that he sort of has to come back together with the people that, you know, quite frankly, pissed him off and frustrated him and you know, led to somewhat maybe to his downfall if you really ask that question to Roman Reigns. Like, he would be able to give you an argument as to why Jey was to blame, as to why Sami was to blame, and those things, right? So I like the fact that they're not just going sort of black and white here with Roman Reigns. There is kind of that middle area where, yes, he's turned the page a bit because he wants vengeance on Solo and wants the Bloodline back and everything like that, but he still has some of that ego, right? Like, even Michael Cole pointed out on commentary that, you know, they're kind of pushing that idea that Reigns' ego can still get the best of him, and I like that. I like the way they're doing that because I just feel like that's the way to go here. And, you know, you think about, again, all the different dynamics that are in play now where, you know, you do have Roman, and how are he and Sami going to interact here on the build-up to War Games? And can they still trust Sami? Because, you know, Solo almost tried to, you know, kind of pull a trick out on him where he's telling Reigns that he needs to find 4 other people, and that's because he would have 5 because Sami Zayn was joining him, right? And then they make sort of the swerve there where Sami, which we all expected, decides to kick Solo in the face, and that leads to, you know, these 4 kind of standing tall here. But that's your setup now, and I think, you know, like I said, the biggest question is going to be what happens between now and Survivor Series, and what happens at Survivor Series, which we'll know more about that once we get closer to the show. But I do think, you know, they do have several weeks to build this up, and I don't feel like it's going to be just smooth sailing. I think you're going to still have some of those things where they are going to go into this feeling like, all right, we thought everybody was back together, everything's calm and happy again, but I don't think it can be that easy. You have to have something that sort of stirs the pot, I feel like, here over the next several weeks, because otherwise it's like, why do it now, right? And I think the timing is important. So for the next 3 weeks, we get to see what buttons are they going to push to maybe get these guys frustrated with each other once again. How does Paul Heyman play into this? You know, do they get kind of back to that point to where, all right, just when we think they've got it all back together, all is lost again, and then maybe that's where it brings in Paul Heyman to finally get everybody for that big sort of pregame speech leading into Survivor Series. Could we see that be the scenario that plays out here? That's certainly an option. And again, I think you also look on the other side of this with the Bloodline, Solo's version of the Bloodline. And what do they have to do now to sort of establish themselves as, a true contender in this match, as the team that can actually win when you know that everyone's going to be looking at this reunited Bloodline of Roman Reigns and thinking that they are just going to be the obvious choice. You have to do something with Solo's version now, I think, to make it clear that this is not going to be as easy as some people think. And so there are some different buttons you can push with that too. But this, as I said, was the big moment. Everyone wanted to see it. Fans got what they wanted. You get these four, Roman Reigns, Jey Uso, Jimmy Uso, Sami Zayn, all standing in the ring together. Everyone's happy for now. Let's see how long that lasts, because these guys came back together for a reason. Some have different reasons than the others, as we said. Sami kind of bringing up the history and how it felt, kind of normal again for him to be in the ring with those guys at Crown Jewel. But he's doing this for Jey. We know Jey's doing this because, he's kind of doing it for the family, yet he doesn't want to be treated, the way that he was before, in which we had the kind of that backstage interaction with Reigns kind of going back into some of those old habits and kind of talking down to Jey. Jey's not going to take that. And we know Jimmy, is back really with Roman first in mind, because those two had that longer connection and everything. But as Sami has brought up before, Jimmy has turned on Roman before. And so you still have all these things that I think, it's not going to be maybe as clear as it seems as it stands right now. But they're back together, and the road to War Games is officially on. We do know that match is going to happen, just as we've known for a while now, but it's official, and now we can start to wonder all the different possibilities that are going to play out in what should be quite a spectacle at War Games at Survivor Series. So we'll talk more about that on the road to Survivor Series in Vancouver 3 weeks away. And yes, there should be plenty more to discuss on this Bloodline saga leading into that. All right, the next biggest thing on this show, you had Kevin Owens hitting the Piledriver, the banned Piledriver, on Randy Orton, and Randy Orton does a stretcher job here. Heads to the hospital. Cody Rhodes goes with him, and that was really all you got from Cody on this show, was him riding in the ambulance with Randy Orton to the hospital. But you guys know, I love the old school wrestling type nature of things, and I think selling is as important as anything else in professional wrestling, sports entertainment, whatever you want to call it. And the fact is, they took one move that has been out of kind of, circulation for a while now as a banned move in the WWE. It's too dangerous, this Piledriver. Over the years, we saw everybody handing out Piledrivers and all that, but it became clear it's just too dangerous, right? And so Kevin Owens brings that out here and decides to use it on Randy Orton. As we said going into Crown Jewel, you have an unhinged Kevin Owens, someone who is willing to show and do anything to prove his point. And I think this is where we wondered, would they go that route at Crown Jewel, right? Would you do something like this where Owens just completely takes out Orton? They didn't go that far because, they did the stuff where they brawled. They never really had the match. And then you had the big, spot on the equipment case or whatever it was where Owens jumps off the railing and hits the elbow on Orton through that. So that wasn't going to completely take out Orton. And so now, though, this is kind of that move where you wonder, did this completely finish Randy Orton? And I love, just again, how they push one single move is all it takes. And that could be it for Randy Orton here because of, the injury history and all this other stuff. And so the fact that Owens decides to go to this length once again shows you that Kevin Owens will do anything to prove that he is right. And you even see the shirt he's wearing now, right? Kevin is right. I love what they are doing with Kevin Owens. I think this is some of the best work of his WWE career, and he's done some good stuff. He's been a world champion before, been a WWE champion, all that. But, this has been fantastic just in terms of it makes sense why Kevin Owens would do these things because he is so frustrated at, the golden goose here, Cody Rhodes, and him getting all the attention and knowing that, Kevin Owens blames Cody for this and all that. And we know it's going to lead to a match between the two. Like, that is inevitable now, especially after a moment like this, because Cody's not focused on Owens in this moment. He's focused on making sure his friend, Randy Orton, is okay, right? And so, once we realize Randy Orton's going to be okay, He may not be back anytime soon because it seems like they're really going to sell this, right? And I think they're going to kind of put this in a situation you would wonder if it's where they're doing this to keep Orton out of this equation now. Let Cody and Owens get their rematch, which, would seem to be sooner rather than later. Let them get to that, and then that is where you kind of put this in a situation where Orton makes his return, and maybe that is where Randy Orton has that light bulb moment where he realizes, I have done all of this, and once again, my friendship with Cody Rhodes, every time I try to sacrifice myself for Cody Rhodes, this is what happens to me. And that may lead to the Viper striking on Cody Rhodes, which we've talked about for months and months and months now. But you can see how it's starting to become more and more clear that that is what they're getting to. And it's just a matter of timing now. When do they actually get to it and all that? At this point, guys, I'm going to be honest with you. I wonder if they are going to stretch this out to WrestleMania 41 with Cody and Orton. That was, when I did my early WrestleMania 41 predictions right after WrestleMania 40 back in April, I had that as my, WWE Championship match, those two. But as you started to see it play out, you're thinking, okay, well, it's got to be Cody and The Rock and Reigns and somehow all that. But this would give you that scenario where if you decide to push this out and do Cody versus Orton, and you do Rock versus Reigns, that gives you the best of both, worlds there, if that's the route they decide to go. But still, we're too far away to know exactly. You could still do Cody and Orton at the Rumble, those kind of things. So it's going to be interesting. But this was a big moment because now you have given Cody a reason to completely lose his mind on Kevin Owens, which, he had some reasons before, but now this is at another level, right? He's realizing this is what Owens, the depth that Owens will sink to prove his point about Cody. And so that has to cause a backlash from Cody. There has to cause some sort of huge reaction from Cody Rhodes here because otherwise, what's Cody doing? He's got to do something now that Randy Orton's career could be over as they're pushing it here with this. So great segment, I thought. And again, really pushes the old school nature we know Triple H loves. All it takes is one move, right? That's all it takes. And bringing out the Piledriver, which has notably been a banned move and all that for a while now, I thought it was just a tremendous touch for this whole segment. So good stuff from Cody and kind of playing his role in this, but really Kevin Owens and Randy Orton, they've done a great job kind of pushing this whole thing kind of with Cody on the peripheral here. So yeah, we'll see what it leads to there, but we know we're getting to that Cody versus Owens match probably before anything else in this saga. But elsewhere, I mentioned earlier, we had a new championship unveiled. The Women's United States Championship is now in WWE, and I know, there's certainly a split audience out there in terms of people who think that there are too many belts in wrestling, people who think there's not enough belts in wrestling, and, this one, I will, reserve any judgment on kind of having a full opinion on just yet, because I think, as always, anytime you introduce a new championship, it's all about how you use it, right? It's really about how do you book the championship? Is it going to feel like just another belt on the show, or are you really going to treat it seriously and not just for 6 weeks, right? For 6 months and 2 years and 5 years? Like, is it going to be treated as something that wrestlers should strive for? Like, they should be looking at this as a goal. It's going to be interesting because, like we said, I think you're looking at it now. If you look at the women's division just on the main roster, right? You've got 2 world championships. You've got the tag team championships, and now you've got a mid-card title. I think at times we've certainly pointed out some things with the tag team division where you can wonder, all right, are they getting enough out of the women's tag team division? But with Bianca and Jade as the champions right now, you have the belts on 2 high-profile superstars, and that can kind of carry things, even if maybe the depth with the challengers and all that is not quite there yet. Although, as we've said, I think it's getting better with the addition of Lash Legend and Jakar Jackson. I think that's a great addition to the tag team. I've been so impressed with them. You guys know I've talked about them a lot over the past several weeks. There's probably going to be more to come. By the way, there was the report out, too, and just to kind of add this in and why maybe they did introduce this mid-card women's title. There was the report, I think from PW Insider. I can't remember exactly the link. I'll try to find it. But that Raw and SmackDown were expected to be 3 hours starting in January. So if you're going to both shows being 3 hours, which, listen, I'm all for everybody getting an opportunity, but that's a lot to have a 3-hour Raw and a 3-hour SmackDown every single week. If that's the direction you're going, then it makes total sense why you would introduce a new championship, because you're going to have more time to fill, especially on Netflix, where we don't know for Raw how that commercial stuff is going to work. You're still probably going to have some of those ads, commercials, whatever, but is it going to be the same as it's been on USA Network, right? And I think that's a question. So you got a lot of time to fill. And so having a mid-card women's championship makes a lot of sense, right? Because now you're going to need more matches. You're going to need more storylines if you're doing 3 hours on both shows. And keep in mind with this belt too, made clear, Nick Aldis introduces it, but Michael Cole, made it clear this is going to be a belt that can be defended on Raw and SmackDown. So a United States Championship for the women's side, this gives you a chance to start to elevate some of those women, right? And keep in mind too, and I keep telling you guys, at some point I'm going to actually do this, but I've kind of been teasing it. I am going to start doing some NXT reviews here on the channel. We haven't done those before, but I think with the state of NXT right now, since the move to the CW, there is a lot of positive momentum for that brand. And one of the reasons why is the depth of the women's division. And I think if you're looking at some of those women down there eventually being call-up potential kind of opportunities sooner rather than later, then I think you've got a situation where it makes a lot of sense. But you've already got enough talent, too, on the main roster as it stands now to effectively book this championship as kind of your mid-card title. But I'm curious to see what happens. How do we get to our first champion? Will it be a tournament? Those kind of things. There are certainly some really good options out there, I think, in terms of crowning your first United States champion on the women's side. And I think, again, one of the reasons why this is being done is because you're going to have more of that television time with both of these, potentially, with Raw and SmackDown, if we are getting 3 hours on both. And so that is very important because you will need more matches, you'll need more storylines, and having another championship could be effective here. But like I said, it's all about how you book it. And, sometimes when you have a lot of titles, it's not easy to book all of them the same, but we'll see how they do here with this one. Because, again, I think the roster of the women's division is only going to get better, especially as they start to move up some of those NXT talents right now. So we'll see how it goes with that. You guys let me know what you think about this new championship. How do you want to see it kind of play out here moving forward? Who would be your pick for the first champion for this women's United States title? We'd love to know what you think on that. All right, elsewhere, kind of a lot of stuff we'll kind of run through quickly. You did have Candice LeRae and Tiffany Stratton kind of going back and forth with each other here. Clearly, they're building in a little bit of tension there with Nia Jax. And so you had Tiffany and Nia team up, and they lose the match to Bianca and Jade. Tiffany's grand plan was that, hey, maybe they're going to beat them, and then they get a shot at the championships. That didn't happen because Candice comes out, and you can tell there's some tension between Tiffany and Candice. So still pushing you in the direction that Tiffany's the one that you're going to eventually cheer if you're not already cheering her, right, based on how this whole thing's playing out. And so maybe kind of Candice becomes the new person that's sort of aligned with Nia Jax. And Jax just said, she did tell Tiffany Stratton, this plan better work. It didn't work. So we know there's going to be repercussions there. And we'll see how those two interact after that. So for now, though, again, I think clearly adding Candice into this somewhere, which, with the release of Indy Hartwell, they were already kind of building up Candice as someone who kind of got that win out of nowhere against Bayley. What was that, several weeks ago? And so clearly kind of have a new direction for her. And clearly it's going to be with everything going on here. So we'll see how it plays out on that. Tag team-wise, you did have the Motor City Machine Guns beat Austin Theory and Grayson Waller here. And we also know they're going to set up the match next week with the Street Profits. And I know there's been a lot of rumors and discussion out there about what's next for the Street Profits. There have been some kind of messages, cryptic messages on Twitter and those kind of things. Don't know exactly what's next, but they've always been one of my favorites, and I hope that they can be a big part of this tag team division moving forward, because like I said, you're kind of in a position now where you really look at the tag team division on the men's side too, and we've certainly brought up your flaws potentially with how the Raw championships have been booked, where you really just have not had a lot at all in terms of what Finn Balor and JD McDonough have done. We know they're going to get the War Raiders up next, but you need that depth on the men's division too. And so, losing a team like the Street Profits would not be good, although I think, some people can point out this clearly may be something storyline related and all that. But do we kind of see a new side of the Street Profits next week whenever they challenge the Motor City Machine Guns for the championships? Wouldn't expect there to be a title change just yet, but do we see kind of something new? Maybe this is where that does lead to the Street Profits snapping after they lose this next opportunity. Could you have them go on the heel side of things? There's some different options there to work with, but you also have kind of the interactions now between DIY and clearly, Tommaso Ciampa they're pointing out is kind of finding that sort of hardened edge that he had back in NXT now. So he's getting pissed at Johnny Gargano. He comes out, wins the match by himself, basically, against Pretty Deadly. And so you're kind of playing up more tension there. Triple H loves the tension between tag team partners. We've seen a lot of that. And so clearly they're working towards something there. And could we just eventually break off into getting another one-on-one feud between Ciampa and Gargano? That seems to be something that is on the table there as well. But again, guys, that was kind of your biggest stuff, I think, on this week's edition of SmackDown. Looking through my notes here in terms of anything else, like we said, I think adding the new championship is certainly one of the biggest talking points coming out of this. I think it's going to be fun to see how they put it all together. And yeah, I mean, next week we've got Jax versus Naomi. We just talked about it. That's going to be for the Women's Championship. WWE Women's Championship, you're also going to have the Motor City Machine Guns defending against the Street Profits. So some things in motion here on the road to Survivor Series, and we'll see kind of how it plays out for everyone. And, of course, we'll see how things go here with the Bloodline. Civil War continues now, and the road to War Games officially on SmackDown. So there you go, guys. Would love to know what you think about this week's edition of SmackDown. What did you like? What didn't you like? What do you think, like I said, about where things head from here over the next several weeks with the Bloodline? And who do you want to see involved in this Women's United States Championship picture and all of that? And give me your thoughts on the men's tag team division. There's a lot kind of, again, I think that you could kind of discuss here coming out of this particular show and looking forward as we look into kind of the next chapter for Raw and SmackDown if they're both going 3 hours here in a couple months. So a lot to come out of that potentially. So again, guys, appreciate you watching as always. Be sure as always, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button as well, and let me know your thoughts on this week's edition of WWE SmackDown.